Why would someone face a giant with only a sling? Think about that carefully. No armor, no sword, no military strength, just a sling. And somehow, the giant fell. At first glance, the story sounds impossible. A young shepherd standing before a trained warrior. One side looked powerful, the other looked unqualified. And maybe that is why this story still resonates deeply today. Because humans naturally judge strength externally. Size, status, experience, resources, influence. People assume visible power always wins. But the story of David and Goliath challenges that assumption completely. Because appearances often mislead people. The giant looked unstoppable, large, experienced, intimidating. Everything about him created fear before the battle even began. And maybe that is the deeper meaning behind giants. Because giants are not always physical. Sometimes giants are emotional, mental, financial, spiritual. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty. Things that appear larger than people feel capable of handling. And when people face intimidating situations, they often assume they are already defeated. Not because the obstacle is unbeatable, but because fear changes perception. Fear magnifies problems. It makes obstacles appear larger than they are. And maybe that still happens every day. People underestimate themselves constantly. Not talented enough. Not experienced enough. Not connected enough. Not powerful enough. But the story introduces a different perspective. What if strength is not always obvious immediately? Now pause for a moment and think about something important. David refused armor. Why? Because the armor belonged to someone else. It did not fit him. And that detail completely changes the meaning of the story. People often try to fight battles using methods that do not align with who they are. They imitate others, copy others, compare themselves constantly. But comparison creates insecurity, and insecurity creates hesitation. David understood something many people still struggle to understand today. He did not need to become someone else to succeed. He needed to use what he already understood. The sling was familiar, simple, ordinary, easy to overlook. Yet in the right hands, it became powerful. Think about that carefully. People constantly underestimate ordinary things. Simple skills, simple ideas, simple opportunities. Because humans naturally associate value with what looks impressive externally. But history repeatedly shows something different. Small things used consistently can create extraordinary results, and maybe that is why this story continues to resonate across generations. Because deep down, people know they are often underestimate what they already possess. Creativity, experience, perspective, discipline, patience. Things that may appear ordinary externally, but carry enormous potential internally. Now here is another detail most people overlook. David ran toward the giant. Think about that carefully. Most people freeze when facing fear. They avoid difficult conversations, avoid difficult decisions, avoid uncertain situations. Fear creates paralysis. But movement changes momentum. And maybe courage is not the absence of fear. Maybe courage is movement despite fear. That changes the entire meaning of bravery. Because courage is not pretending fear does not exist. It is refusing to let fear control direction. Now think about modern life again. People wait until they feel fully confident before acting, fully prepared, fully certain, fully fearless. But that moment rarely arrives completely. Growth usually happens during movement, not before it. And perhaps that is another hidden lesson inside the story. Confidence often develops through action, not before action. Now think about the giant himself. Everyone focused on his size. But size alone does not guarantee victory. Visibility is not the same as strength. And maybe modern culture still struggles with that distinction. People assume influence equals wisdom. Money equals value. Appearance equals significance. But external power does not always reflect inner stability. And external weakness does not always reflect inability. That is why the story reverses expectations. The person everyone underestimated becomes the one who changes everything. And perhaps that still happens more often than people realize. People dismissed today sometimes become the people who shape the future tomorrow, because potential is difficult to measure externally. Now think about the deeper symbolism of the sling itself. A simple tool. Nothing glamorous, nothing impressive to the crowd, yet it became enough. And maybe that is another lesson people often miss. People delay action, waiting for perfect conditions, perfect resources, perfect opportunities. But many breakthroughs begin with ordinary tools used faithfully. The problem is not always a lack of ability. Sometimes the problem is underestimating what is already available. And maybe that is why this story still matters deeply today. Because humans still compare themselves constantly, still doubt themselves constantly, still assume they need more before taking action. More money, more recognition, more approval. But perhaps the deeper lesson is this: what people already possess may already be enough to begin. So the real question is not, why did David use a sling? The real question is, what abilities, ideas, or strengths are people overlooking inside themselves today, simply because they appear too ordinary? And what might change if people stopped comparing themselves long enough to use what they already have? If this made you think differently, subscribe to Grace Unseen for more hidden biblical truths and deeper meanings behind the stories most people overlook.